Hello, viewers! We are eager to share the beauty of literature with you. Let us talk about the comparison between Philippine literature and European literature. But first, let us talk about the Philippine literature.
The Philippines is brimming with cultural diversity and linguistic legacy. Even before Spanish colonization, its literature had evolved immensely. Spanish colonization did not put a halt to the development of literature. Rather than that, it infuses spirit into indigenous literary works through religion and institutions. European civilization is etched in the indigenous cultures.
That's right. The pre-Spanish colonization is characterized by legends of old custom reflected Filipinos, devoid of actual events that aim to entertain. Folk tales are collections of stories about existence, voyages, and many more. Epics are protracted narrative poems that detail a series of heroic deeds or events. Folk songs are the oldest extant forms of Philippine literature, dating back to the pre-Spanish period.
Now, why don't we talk about some notable writers and their legendary works? Let's start with Dr. Jose Rizal. He wrote the Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. Noli Me Tangere is a novel that sparked the social enlightenment of Filipinos during the Spanish period. He wrote the book to expose the wrongdoings of Philippine society.
El Filibusterismo inspires the Filipino people. This book awoke Filipinos in the past. It continues to provoke Filipinos to have a foreseeable sight to fight for our country. Let's move on to Francisco Balagtas. He was a known Filipino poet and author known as the Prince of Tagalog Poets. And people compared him with William Shakespeare in his presence and leverage on Philippine literature.
That's amazing. Let's now proceed to Nick Joaquin, the novelist and the journalist Joaquin. Labeled the best Filipino writer in English, was able to cultivate his unique prose style that was much more relatable to Filipinos. He showed beauty in real-life events through his writing during the colonization period of the Spanish and American regimes.
We also have Graciana Lopez Haina. He was a prominent journalist, orator, reformer, and national hero. He is best known for his newspaper, La Solidaridad. He revealed several of the friars' avarice, ambitions, and immortality.
Last but not the least, Luelhati Torres Bautista. She is one of the most notable female novelists in contemporary Filipino literature. Bautista has captured realistic 1970s scenes, highlighting the changes that have happened during the Plaza Miranda explosion and the restriction of the writ of habeas corpus in the Philippines.
Now, let's take ahead to the significance of Philippine literature. Philippine literature reflects the Filipino serenity. Subsequently, literature has learned the creations of expressing the most profound human experiences in words that evoke visions of Filipinos.
The propaganda movement, 1872 to 1896, the intellectual middle class led by Jose Rizal, Marcelo del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Aena, Antonio Luna, Mariano Ponce, Jose Maria Panganiban, and Pedro Paterno, drove this movement. This movement sought the following reforms and changes.
The preponderance of literature intended to stimulate the populace and prepare people for freedom. Literature is essential for it allows us to understand the culture. We encourage everyone to find the time to appreciate Philippine literature because it is an enchanting place to gain a deep sense of the Philippines and the citizens.
I agree with you. Now, let's explore the beauty of European literature or Western literature. European literature is still known today for its unique features that set it apart from other works. Also, another amazing fact about European literature is that it consists of many languages. Most are English, Spanish, Dutch, Modern Greek, to name a few.
Yet, to understand European literature further, let us look at each division. Let's start with ancient literature. Holy Scripture had proliferated and became influential to Europeans up until today. We see the creations of invented songs, poems, fables, myths, and parables. Medieval literature highlighted stories of humanity, of their culture and morals. The literature of this time marked the beginning of the fall of the Roman Empire.
Luckily, Renaissance followed after the Middle Ages. Renaissance revived a new period of intellectual and creative inquiry, which was the defining aspect of this political, theological, and philosophical event. The reason and passion sparked in the 18th century era, philanthropy, the exaltation of personal relationships, religious devotion, and the cult of sentiment or sensibility were all promoted by the cultivation of views.
The 19th century is the formative phase of many current literary conditions and trends. Romanticism, symbolism, and realism are examples of influences that originated or developed during this time. Let's head on to some important writers and their works. Homer is an ancient Greek author and epic poet around the 8th or 9th century BCE in Ionia.
Iliad took place during the Trojan War. It tells the 10-year war against Troy and the life of Achilles. The Odyssey poem depicts the 10-year journey of Odysseus. The war ends and Odysseus travels back to his homeland Ithaca. Both epic poems were close to the heart of the Greeks as they influenced their culture, education, and literature during the classical era.
Giovanni Boccaccio is an Italian poet and one of the founders of the Renaissance. Being a humanist, Boccaccio influenced humanism through his works, one of which was his mother's masterpiece, The Decameron, or Ten Working Days. Throughout the story, it pictures the tragic and amusing views of life. Despite being a fictional piece, the event serves as a references to the aggressive effect brought by the Yersinia pestis bacteria. But, as I've said earlier, it also contains a humor, as Boccaccio wrote the piece to comfort the victims.
Are you familiar with the story of Snow White, Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, and Rumpelstiltskin? I bet you do. These are some of the stories written by two significant authors of European literature from Germany. Yes, two. They are Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, are also known as the Brothers Grimm. Their investigations regarding folk songs and tales became the foundation of the book entitled The Children's and Household Tales or the Grimm's Fairy Tales. And this was to preserve the tradition and morals of the previous centuries before they were forgotten.
Last but not the least, featured author is Victor Hugo. Victor Hugo is a poet, novelist, and playwright, considered the most important French romantic writer. Alongside this, he wrote two novels that became successful immediately, one of which was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Another literary piece he wrote was Les Miserables, a historical novel concerned with the political issue during the 19th century.
The European writers left great legacies of European culture that forever remain. Blending the European culture with the Philippines shaped Philippine literature.
To tell about the similarities of two literature, America influenced Philippine and European literature in the 20th century. Also, both kinds of literature have tackled Christianity. Philippine literature reflects more foreign, since it has more history of colonialism. These colonies are Spaniards, American, and Japanese. On the other hand, European literature has a little foreign influence.
Now, we have understood what a Philippine and European literature are. We hope you have learned something fascinating. Till the next vlog!